Hi everyone, so today as you can see we will be doing slightly different video. This is something what I aimed to edit a long time ago, and you can see here the Tatra military truck starting. But what we are going to talk is the trip to Smrzovka Museum. So it's a museum of military vehicles in Czech Republic, and if you happen to be here, really recommend to visit them, especially on 8th of May. They have a really cool show where you get the chance to see various technique, various vehicles in operating state, let's say. You can even drive them or ride them, which is also quite cool. And today's video is mostly dedicated to the visit when I and my friends tried to help with this tank. So as you can see here is the famous British tank, and we have I would say it in the disassembled state. So the main task was to actually separate the side armor and to have it ready for restoration. The overall condition is not that good, and there is a lot of work to be done. As you can see, a lot of rust to be cleaned, and the panel itself was also a bit difficult to separate, which you will see in this video. And the process took almost whole day, but in let's say final result, guys succeeded. So the first step was of course to apply various liquids in order to remove the rust, to try to clean up the joints, and also some of the suspension was exposed because the side panels were removed. But as you can see, the floor was rusty, and that's also a good idea for some weathering ideas. And also there are some, let's say, modifications, quote unquote. These were used because the tank was also modified for different purposes. It can be visible on the poster in front of the tank. And well, the overall story of this tank is not that, I would say, cool, because it was actually forgotten that it was a tank, and then now this Smrzovka Museum is trying to restore it to the proper condition when it will be looking like a tank, at least. Not rideable as far as I know, but at least look like a tank, and maybe also whole condition will be restored to up notch. But maybe it will be even rideable, so who knows. So first of all, the process was of removing the rivets which were holding the side armor in place. Some of them were stuck in place, so it was requiring a bit of welding. As you can see, the welding was used in order to melt them and to force them out, because basically you don't need the screws. But the small secret is that some of the screws were actually possible to remove, if we can say it this way, or rivets possible to remove. So I got a chance to get one in my collection, so it's really good memorabilia, because it's coming from the real Valentine, and that's a really nice thing to have on the shelf. So overall, this, of course, it looks a bit barbarian, I would say, because you just melt all the metal inside the holes. But this is something what was needed, so you could not avoid it, and as you can see, it gave a certain result. This small liquid sign is actually the sign of the screw or the rivet actually melting out and pouring out. So it basically also removes the connection between this armor panel, as you will see further in the video review. And well, the weather conditions were actually quite suitable for such activity. It wasn't too warm, but it was also quite okay for such work, and we were doing a lot of stuff actually there. So the tank itself is already in half disassembled condition, if I can say it this way. So there is no interior which will be restored, there is no engine which should be also restored. That's why I'm not sure whether it will be drivable or rideable, and frankly speaking I do not remember what was the initial plan, but I will confirm it a bit later, I guess. And also you can see that suspension parts are really in not the best condition, so that's also something to be improved, and also something what can be finalized with assembly when all of these armor panels will be restored. And well, inside what I can note, while these some screws, or I'm really eager to call them screws, but we all know that this is more of the bolts or the rivets. So while they're melting out, I can also tell you about the overall impressions in the interior. So the overall inside space of this tank is really cramped, and I'm not sure how the crew was operating in such conditions. And also these special manholes or the openings, the hatches, are also quite tiny. You have to have a really slim, narrow body in order to fit in there, and believe me, I did not fit in there, so that was quite a funny experience. So here you can see also guys trying to lift the main gun from, I think it was the German vehicle. So the special crane was brought, and why it was necessary to do so, because this armor panel had to be removed and this special small crane had to be moved closer, so that's why all of the obstacles had to be moved away, and that's what is done at the moment. I think the strikes which you can see at the background were also from the same tank, so this is also something going on to this tank. And of course all of this rust, all of this dirt is also a good material for some weathering ideas, so in case you wondered on how to replicate this or that thing, here you get a really good reference. And I think, well, if you manage to pull out such project in whatever scale you prefer, it would be quite impressive. And it doesn't have to be a fully disassembled tank like here, but I think it's definitely worth trying. And I mean, you see the variety of the rust types, you see also the variety of the colors. So that's why I would suggest better to work in bigger scales, because it would look even more engaging and even more realistic. And what I really like about this experience is that you get to see how the metal actually rusts on such vehicles. So it's not the plain rust as we are used to depicted with the pigments, it's more of the surface rust, and that's why I'm always saying that when the rust on the vehicles is copied just in a plain condition, in the plain surface, it's not exactly realistic, and it's better to do a slightly rough surface, because that's how it usually gets eaten by the rust, and that's how the smooth surfaces actually get covered by the rust. So again, the rivets removal took some time, as you can notice, and all of this was shot in real time. And I mean, the process itself is quite impressive because of all of this bright sparkles going outside. And then once you melted all of the rivets, you had to knock down by the hammer and also use the tools in order to separate this armor panel. So basically it is held in place only by these rivets. There is no welding, but due to the age, due to the rust and dirt, as you can see, it was really stuck to the main hull section, and it was requiring some time to separate. And by the way, here comes the joke about the design of the lower hull section, because these are actually separate panels which should have been connected together. And I wonder if any of the brands will be brave enough in the future to replicate the tank structure in this way, so that you get to assemble the rivets, you get to assemble the separate armor panels. And by the way, on the poster you can also note that this vehicle was also used by the army in several markings, which is also quite interesting. I'm not sure if any of the decal suppliers are actually copying this marking, but I think it is possible to copy it with your own hands and tools, because the insignia, the signs are not that difficult to actually mimic on your vehicle. Again, in the big scale. I don't know why, but I think this tank is worth replicating in a bigger scale. But overall, as you can see, the good old WD-40 was used, and then the armor panel was actually attached to the crane, because as you can see, it is already separating, and well, once it's off you won't be able to lift it because it's not that light. And also note the thickness, it's not as thick as some modders would like to argue about, and still it was quite effective armor, because basically you get two layers. Do not forget that under this panel you get the suspension, and then another panel which is actually constructing the separate space. So once the panel was separated, now we had to tow it to the wall to put it aside, and here you can take a look at the suspension inside the vehicle. So the overall suspension design is quite interesting. To be honest, I was not that familiar with the suspension design of the vehicles, but you can see how the dirt and the sand and also the rust builds up inside, so it's really interesting how they were serviced, and also something what might be replicated again in the scale. But well, again, I have not imagined that it actually gets that dirty, and then, I mean, it's really hard to think how the mechanics were servicing this, especially if you had a failure of the shock absorber inside, then you had to remove this armor panel. And again, would you be able to do this in the field conditions? I'm not that sure. And of course it will require a lot of special tools. So here is the closer look. As you can see, once you get the failure of one of the shock absorbers, it's again really hard to diagnose. And again, close-ups of the surfaces are quite useful no matter which tank you will be building, so feel free to use this. And I think the variety of the weathering is also quite useful overall. Maybe I will be taking my camera again just to take a bit more close-ups to show more details, because I think it's worth covering this topic again and worth showing a bit more, because all of these parts look quite impressive and, well, it's something different from what we are used to seeing in museums. So, by the way, here you can see the left hatch open, and that's what I was talking about. So once it's open, there is a certain let's say manhole where you can go inside, but it's not that wide, and I really wonder how it was possible to jump out of the tank in case of necessity, in case you needed to avoid any damage or injury. So if you know, feel free to write in the comment section. But for now you can see that the other side was actually engaged in the same procedure, so you had to use this high temperature welding in order to melt out all of the rivets. And well, it was more or less successful, but some of the I mean, the overall connection between the panel and the hull was not that easy to break on this side, and some of the sections had to be left over for overnight because it was not possible to remove it at that day. But I think even removing the left panel from what you are seeing here in the video was a really great success, because before it was a great struggle and guys were actually not unable to take it off. So here basically the work goes the same. You remove these melt outs with help of the chisel and also the hammer. And well, this was made in order to just to break the connection, and here you can take a closer look of these connections still steaming after the high temperature. But overall it looks easy, but it takes some time, and of course you have to have experience of working with such tools, because it's definitely not a child's play, and as you can see, special equipment is necessary. So next again we had to smash the hammer onto the panel. So why it is done? In order to break the connection, and as you can see, the hammer itself is quite big in order to achieve the necessary pressure. And don't worry, it does not even damage the panel. So I was checking where the hammer landed, and it's not even scuffed by this, which is also quite impressive. You get the idea of how this armor panel is tough, and also what kind of protection they're providing. Obviously this is more of a light tank, so that's why we don't get a lot of armor, but imagine the same on some kind of heavy tank, for example Tiger. And as you can see, it took several people changing one by one in order to get the some considerable result, and then again the chisels were used in order to try to detach this panel. And well, again, it's really something what I was not expecting, that this panel will get that attached to the main hull. And that's why I was saying that basically you can get the same situation in the battlefield, and then how do you separate this panel in very urgent conditions? So as you can see, again, the welding is here, the oxygen bottles were changed, the wire gets unstuck or unwinded, and for now you can take a look at this weathered tracks. Again, another good material for some weathering ideas, and also the weathering structure of the rust. So again, that's what I was talking about, that it's not the plain equal surface, and of course you have to clean all of the dirt which was built up in the suspension. So all of this is coming from the suspension arms, and then once the armor panel was removed. As you can see, the next step is to remove this special bars which are holding in place the shock absorbers. So basically it is done with help of the weight which is being screwed inside this special part. And then you just knock the weight outside and you basically remove this part. As you can see, again, this is a bit of the manpower needed, and definitely not a fast procedure, because even with hard trying, it was visible that this part is going really slowly outside because of the time, because of the dirt buildup and all other things here. And again, note the condition of the shock absorbers of the suspension elements. They're really dirty and it gets some power, some time to remove them. As you can see, again, it is quite heavy part, so even though one man can handle one spring, but it's still something to work with. And as you can notice, some of the suspension elements were removed before, but it was necessary to remove them all in order to renovate it. And again, the hammer work actually ensured, as you can see, the success. And then again, the same was done with other upper shock absorbers. Overall suspension design, of course, is quite smart, because you get to pack a lot of the dampening power into such low mount, well, relatively low mount, which is also holding that much of the weight. But of course, the servicing again is really something what I would not be looking forward if I would be working with this tank, because it will take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and you can notice the size of the parts. So, by the way, what I was doing is actually cleaning all of the parts. Inside the museum you can find also the shells, the used shells from various tanks, and this is quite interesting to take a look again for some weathering ideas. And I also took some close-ups of the various vehicles which are inside, so it might be handy for some builds as well, who knows. And overall, the mount of the vehicles in this museum is quite impressive, even more impressive that many of them are on working condition. So the next task was to change the wheels on the flag, and this is even more funny procedure, because as you remember, the flag has double wheel setup on each side, and well, to remove one of the wheels, remove one of the tires, is definitely not a trivial task. And again, this is something what I cannot imagine doing in a really fast way in the battlefield, for example, if you need to move this setup. As you can see, I'm not familiar with the wheels setup of the German vehicles, to be honest, so as you can see, it was requiring a bit of exploration. But yeah, it takes some time to remove all of those attachments which are actually holding the outer wheel in place. Then you have to fit the wheel in the right condition, then you have to fix it also with the special handlers. So this is plenty of work. It requires several people, because otherwise it's nearly impossible to get everything held in place. And of course, you need to get some patience in order to hold everything in place while screwing all of these parts which are holding the outer rim in place. By the way, the lifting was done by lifting the just the part of the axle, and believe me, it was not an easy procedure as well. So, I mean, now I can say that I changed the wheel on the flag, but this is not the greatest experience. But then, how many people can actually say that they tried it in their lifetime? So that's why I was mainly laughing, because, well, the overall mechanism is not that straightforward. It's the famous design of the suspension on the German vehicles, which is really taking effort to assemble and disassemble. But again, I think this flag was also in working condition. At least overall state was looking fine, and the size of the flag is actually quite impressive. Frankly speaking, when I saw the scale models, I did not assume that it's so big. And of course, in order to tow it, you need some truck, so also something to remember. And well, you can see this in the same room with the Stewart tank, which is also quite good condition. I think it was in a driving condition. And now you can also take a look at some of the other vehicles details. So overall, I again recommend to visit the Smrzovka Museum if you are interested, and of course do not forget to leave your impression in the comment section below, and I will try to make another report of this type soon. Bye.